Hello, we are talking today with Caroline Ceniza-Levine, who is a recruiter, career expert, and founder of the Dream Career Club, and a media personality who provides career advice, explains current hiring trends for the U.S. job market, and speaks on all aspects of landing one's dream career, including how to change careers, how to build a strong personal brand, how to cultivate a supportive network, and how to effectively negotiate. With her insider knowledge of how companies decide who to hire, promote, or let go, Caroline helps clients advance their careers from middle management to the executive level, make more money, or make a big career pivot. She has also coached executives from Amazon, Goldman Sachs, Google, McKinsey, Tesla, and other leading firms. Caroline is a senior contributor to Forbes Leadership, an adjunct at Columbia University, and the author of Jump Ship: 10 Steps to Starting a New Career. She has been a repeat guest on CBS, CNN, CNBC, and Fox Business, and is regularly quoted in major media outlets. I'm thrilled to have Caroline today in the studio. We talk about how to search for jobs the most efficient way, how to define or explain gaps in your employment, and how to put a value on the services that you bring so you get paid what you deserve. Let's dive in. Hello, I'm your host Dorothy Mashburn, and welcome to Salary Negotiations Made Simple. Here I show you how negotiating does not have to be overwhelming. I break the entire process of negotiating into easy-to-learn steps that you can use in any salary negotiation situation, whether you're starting a new job or preparing to ask for a raise. Expect to receive practical, actionable strategies that are based on real-life experiences. I'll be sharing tips that have been proven to work, where professionals like you have netted anywhere from $10,000 to $75,000 more in compensation. It's payment for the skills you already bring, so you need to know how to ask for payment for that value. Are you ready to learn how to boost your earnings? Let's dive in. Hi, Caroline. How are you today?
Hi, Dorothy. I'm good. Thanks for having me on your podcast.
Absolutely. Well, welcome to the studio. Would you start us off with a quick introduction about yourself? What do you do and how do you help?
Sure. So I'm Caroline Ceniza-Levine. I'm the founder of the Dream Career Club, which is a career coaching membership that helps experienced professionals earn a great living doing what they love. So I'm a big believer that money and meaning are not mutually exclusive. You can make a great living doing something that you enjoy and that's meaningful. And that's what I preach, and that's what I help my clients do.
Yeah. And how long have you been doing this?
So I have had my own company since 2008. So it's 16 years and counting. But before that, I worked as a strategy consultant. I've worked in retained executive search, and I've also worked in in-house recruiting. And so I've been on that other side of the desk, if you will, hiring people and seeing how decisions get made around promotions, around layoffs, around bonuses and raises. And so I bring that inside information to my clients.
Ah, wow, that's significant, right? A lot of times people worry about the hidden nature of things in HR and recruitment.
Yeah, I think people think it's a big black box. You submit an application, you don't know what happens to it. Or even if you're in the interview process, sometimes you think things are going well and then you don't get the job. And then you play head games with yourself around, did I say something wrong? Or did someone just not like me? Or what exactly happened? And there are so many touch points in the hiring process that can easily get confused as to what's really happening.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a good segue, actually. One of the things we were talking about during our chat prior to the podcast was around this worry about, among a lot of job seekers right now that they may not hear back from recruiters, or they may not even get that first call. And even if they do, there's a worry that there'll be, some ghosting happening. What are you finding, and how are you advising people to navigate that?
Yeah, well, I mean, ghosting is so unfortunate. I've seen it both ways. I've seen candidates just disappear. I've seen employers who don't have their processes buttoned up regarding acknowledging, an application, closing out an application, closing out after an interview, et cetera. So it happens, unfortunately. I think what the most important thing to focus on for job seekers is to have multiple leads in play so that you're not beholden to any one opportunity, and you're not so dependent or invested on any one opportunity working out, because there can be many reasons why it doesn't, through no fault of your own. They might decide to move someone in internally. They might decide not to hire someone. They might decide that the role is slightly different than what they had posted, and maybe you were perfectly fine and they were interested in you before things changed, but now things have changed. Maybe the headcount approval has gone away. The budget has gone away. The budget has changed. So there are just so many factors that are outside of your control. But one factor that's in your control, of course, is how many feelers you're putting out there, how many conversations you're having, and your own forward momentum. So that's what you should be focused on.
Mm-hmm. Do you provide a general rule of thumb as to, I know some people do and some people don't, on how many applications should you have in play per day or per week?
Well, it's not about how many that you send out. I tell my clients to aim to have 5 to 10 active leads, which means that they're having conversations with people about actual jobs. These jobs may or may not be posted. There is that hidden job market where jobs get created for people. Sometimes you're talking to someone and they haven't decided yet that they're hiring, but you are starting to talk about potentially working together. I consider that absolutely an active lead. And of course, there are jobs that are posted, and sometimes you submit for a job and you get called in for a job, and that is also an active lead. But just blindly submitting resumes, I really don't consider that, part of the search. I consider looking at job postings as part of your research, but the return on just an unsolicited application is so low that I really try to get my clients to focus on directly contacting people, working their own network, and getting into at least an exploratory meeting, and saving the job postings for research, which is what it is.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, very true. Working your network, right? That keeps coming up in all of my guests, because they don't necessarily help you get the job, but they can at least put you up where somebody notices your resume.
Yeah, for sure. And they can also give you information that might help you tailor your conversations better, that might help you ask the right questions, or share the right examples that are going to resonate with the people that you meet. So it's not just about getting introductions, but it's also about getting that information and that insight, that
Yeah.
inside information that's so
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, which can really help you in the interview process then.
Absolutely. And of
Yeah.
course, you need to have your own interview technique buttoned up. I mean, you can't just rely on your friends to smooth the path for you. You want to be able to answer, why should they hire you? To be able to talk about yourself, to be able to talk about what contributions you make, your skills, your expertise, your experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Switching gears a little bit to value, you talk a lot about value, in several of your posts and your newsletter. What is your advice on people who are, especially women executives, who are worried about asking for a big number and then, feeling either guilty about it or not sounding confident when putting that number out?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many factors in play regarding negotiation, and it's really, I mean, we could talk for hours about the subject, but specifically regarding value, I mean, you really need to wrap your arms around what your value is and what are the proof points really around that value so that you can actually prove to yourself, first you have to negotiate with yourself and make sure that you have convinced yourself that what you're asking for makes sense. And it's both about you and what your performance is and the skills and expertise and experience that you're bringing, but it's also about the broader market. And so what's the market saying? And what does this role require? And you want to make sure that you don't get into a situation where you're expected to add, millions of dollars into the bottom line and you're not even getting a fraction of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Any tips on how to get good with yourself? You said you have to negotiate with yourself.
Well, I mean, I find that I have a 7-step process to preparing for a negotiation. And the first step is to know what you want. And I find that even experienced and very smart, talented professionals don't always, really look at the entirety of an offer, which includes not only a base salary and performance bonus, but for many of my experienced clients, we're talking about possibly equity participation or options, or the bonus is also decided on company performance and your own individual performance. And then of course, there are your roles and responsibilities. There's your title. There are things like start date and the scheduling and the flexibility and the location and whether relocation is involved and guaranteed severance, so people don't think about, all the entirety of an offer. And so that really is the first step to really think about, what exactly are we talking about here? I was recently coaching someone and I asked a very, I thought, straightforward question regarding what is your salary requirement? What is the floor that we're talking about here? And she had, really, really good experience working at a brand name company. And she quoted a floor that was lower than what she's making now. So, and I understand that what she's trying to say to me is, hey, I would look at something. I don't need to be making what I'm making now. I'm willing to look at something that's less than that. But I also thought, gosh, this is our first conversation, and why not just make your current salary the floor? Like, why do we have to assume I'm not even negotiating with her and she's already negotiating herself
Against
down?
herself.
Yeah. And so I said, well, why don't we just make your current salary the floor, because it's not an unreasonable salary. I've been in situations where, let's say someone's coming from a very high paying career like investment banking and they want to do something else. And that's when we have to have a real discussion about salary, because there are just certain industries that are not going to pay, that they just pay so much more than others. So I get that, but she was not in one of those industries. It was a very reasonable salary. And I felt like it was coming from a place of, well, I'm not sure, that I can get that elsewhere. It's like, I don't know. We've got to try that first.
Before we say no, or before we argue against ourselves. How often do you find, as you're coaching people, like that light bulb moment go up and then it's just everything is up from there, because that's sort of the first hurdle about negotiating against yourself. And once they get over that, what else are they able to achieve?
Well, I mean, I don't know that it's I would say that it's a light bulb moment. Negotiation is a skill that improves with practice. And I think that I don't want people to think of it as a light bulb moment, because I don't want people to feel like it's either on or it's off, because that just isn't the case. There are negotiations where, again, to the best of your ability, and it doesn't work out. And maybe you can't see eye to eye about whether it's base salary or it's flexibility or it's title or it's whatever. Just like we might negotiate with our significant other about who gets the holidays, with whose family, or, gets to pick the restaurant, so sometimes you just don't agree. I think the better way to think about it is, if you feel like you cannot or do not know how to negotiate, that is something that can be improved.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something where if you're willing to put in the work and do the preparation, have a candid conversation with yourself and with your coach about what it is that you want, and then do the research and the practice, around mock negotiations and languaging and really doing that advanced preparation, that you will put yourself in a better situation.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen many instances where a job offer gets rescinded because somebody has negotiated?
No. And in fact, it's so rare that I had to write about that because someone asked that question. And a lot of my blogs are inspired by real life audience questions. So yeah, someone asked that question. And in 30 years of working in and around talent issues, it has happened one time. And it was someone who already accepted an offer and then tried to double back and negotiate. And they lost the offer, not because they negotiated, but because the employer felt like they were negotiating in bad faith, that they had given their word. And then all of a sudden they were coming back. And by the way, they were coming back for percentage points. It wasn't even 5% of the total compensation. And the employer just got so annoyed. They were like, what is happening? Because they had gone rounds and rounds and they had gone up from the initial offer. And it was a very competitive offer. And the feeling was, if we can't take this person at their word, are they even going to start? I mean, are they going to stick around? Like, what is happening? And so I think that's just such an important distinction to make, that it wasn't because that person negotiated, it was because they negotiated in bad faith.
Yeah. Then it becomes an integrity challenge or an integrity question.
Absolutely. And just like anything else, we want to work with people that we know, like, and trust.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. That's great. Yeah, and that is the one thing I continue to see is there is a fear that, I'm desperately in need of a job. And what if I negotiate and somebody rescinds the job because I negotiated? But in 30 years, you've seen it once.
Yeah. I mean, on the contrary, I think that employers appreciate someone who is a good negotiator. They'd like to have that person on their team rather than on the other side of the desk. And especially if you negotiate in a polite, business-minded manner, because again, this is a long-term relationship. You're going to be working with these people. So you're not going to be breaking furniture and yelling and screaming. And so it's a business conversation. And the reality is that you want to work together. You agree on probably 90% of this offer, and it's really just a couple of sticking points, and that you can work together on this. And I think it's important for people to realize that negotiation is more collaboration than conflict.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think people are worried, when we see the high octane stuff on Hollywood movies, it's like, it's not that. It's more problem solving. It's more, like you said, a business conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And when does anything resemble Hollywood? I mean,
Yep. Switching gears one more time, Caroline, you write a lot about people working with gaps in their employment. And what advice do you have for people who are job hunting right now and are nervous that there was a gap in their employment, and how do they explain that?
yeah, so it always depends on when the gap occurred, how long it was. And the most important thing is, what were you doing during the gap? At the end of the day, the employers are trying to hire someone who's going to solve their problem. Even though they say they're hiring a certain background or skills or expertise or experience, that's relevant to their problem. So whatever is going to wave that magic wand. And so it's less a question of, oh, there's a gap, I'm not going to talk to that person. It's more, why is that gap there? And is that person really employable? Is there a reason that there's the gap there? Are their skills atrophied? Are they out of date? Are they unable to work in an office environment with the deadlines and everything else because they're just not used to working? And so it's what the gap implies more so than, oh, there's a gap, therefore I'm not speaking to you. I think that's really important for people to remember, because if they can explain what they've been doing during the gap, if they are well researched and they know what's happening in the industry and they've been keeping their technical skills up to date. Maybe they've been doing a little bit of consulting here or there, volunteering even, but showing that they've been in and around, environments, work environments, working with other people, working in teams, working on deadline. So they've been essentially keeping their skills sharp. It's just not in a paid professional environment. That's fine too.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a good reminder too. So if you are in a layoff situation, maybe you're working on something that invests in yourself or upskilling or volunteering, but with intention, it seems like is your advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had a client who was in his 60s, and he had taken 5 years off to care for an elderly parent. That's a very understandable and reasonable gap there. And he had been in customer experience, so customer service, but he had been managing, a call team. And so he was very well versed in that. And I said, look, no one says customer service anymore. People talk about customer experience or customer care or the client experience. I said, and so you really need to familiarize yourself with what has been happening since you left and go back to people that had hired you before and really just have conversations, figure out what is happening in the world, see if you can help anybody like in your circle with their customer experience so that you can say, that during this time off, you've also been doing X, Y, Z. And it might be, of course, that 95% of his time off is caring for, an elderly parent. And it's only recently he's starting to, run up this experience. But for an employer who's struggling with, in this case, customer experience, hearing him talk about like his expertise, because he did have quite a deep well of experience before he took off for several years. And so if he can jump right back into it and appear like the person who can solve problems, you're going to get interest. And sure enough, he started talking to people. They realized, hey, this guy knows what he's talking about. And he started with some consulting projects, which makes sense. He needs to get that flexibility. He needs to ramp back into it. He very quickly got people interested in his background because he focused on what he's bringing and what his skills are and less on the gap.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's great advice. Thank you for that. That will really help a lot of our audience understand that it's what you do with your time, and then how do you use that to explain what you've been doing? Like, do you have hustle? Do you have problem solving? What are you doing with that? And that's all it takes sometimes.
Yeah, and it's so important that you are able to explain that you're able to tell someone your story. And this is why I didn't even go over applying for jobs. I said immediately, you've got to reach out to people and you've got to reach out to heads of customer care and just go right to the decision makers and talk to them because you know what's going on and what their pain points are. And you can talk about when you've managed teams. And this way it seems like, oh, this person's knowledgeable, they're familiar. The first thing that they see is not the gap. They're already hearing all of the expertise and the skills that they're already imagining. Oh, if we could get someone like this working with our teams, maybe we would help solve some of these problems.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we started with the question of, job hunting. So I'd like to sort of taper our conversation with the same type of a question. What advice do you have for job seekers who, may or may not have taken a break, but are looking for their next promotion or their next step up? How do they go about doing their job search, especially considering there's so many candidates out there?
Yeah, so I guess I would say a couple of things. One is we talked about the importance of networking and reaching out to people. And I had mentioned, you want to keep your forward momentum. You can't control if people call you back. You can't control if people will hire you. Like sometimes you just get bested by another candidate or something about the search changes. So you have to control what you can control. And in terms of whether it's career advancement or career change or a job search, that's what you're doing day in and day out, making sure that you are identifying opportunities that are interesting to you, that you're real with yourself about what your qualifications are and what your interests are. If you go after the right opportunities, you market yourself in the right way, you know how to interview, you know how to talk to people, you keep those connections, you negotiate for what you deserve. So that's the first part, right? Is that you're doing the work. But I would say that the second part is that you monitor along the way what your results are. As much as I say, hey, right, you can't control everything, you can only control your own effort. But if you find that you are putting the effort, you're talking to lots of people and you're still not either hearing about leads or getting to the right leads or getting past the first interview, then obviously there's something wrong that you need to troubleshoot. And so you want to have either expert guidance along the way or at least just some self-awareness to say, you know what, I have been working at this for a while and I am not seeing the results, because there might be a mismatch between what you say you're looking for and the actual jobs you're getting to see. It might be the messaging, your marketing, it might be how you interview, it might be how you network and ask people for what you need and rekindle those connections. It might be a lot of different things. There are a lot of touch points on the hiring process. So I do think there are missteps that can be made along the way, but like you can get help for that. And there's a lot of resources online. And as you mentioned, Dorothy, you've been reading my stuff. So I post a lot of things. And so there's a lot of information out there. But if you're finding that you're stuck, you might need that extra push or help or accountability.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. Accountability. That's important.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I said, I think that you have to make sure that you're doing the work and that you're doing all of the work, the identification, the marketing, the networking, the interviewing, etc. The accountability comes in if you're not doing that work. But if you are, then, and still you're not seeing results, then it becomes, like what exactly is happening? How can we diagnose why a first round isn't turning into a callback, or why the callback isn't turning into an offer, or why you're never even getting the first round to begin with?
Right.
What's going on?
Right. Well, thank you, Caroline. Where can people find you if they want to work with you?
Yeah, it's super easy. It's dreamcareerclub.com. And so that will have all of the information. And the club has a number of resources available to members, but there are certain resources that are open to the public. So you can see what those are and sample and hear more about my philosophy and my approach. And then you can get more resources, obviously, by joining the club. And then there's also opportunity to get coaching one-to-one with me to do that kind of troubleshooting and practice, if it's negotiation practice or interview practice or something like that.
Absolutely. Well, we'll put everything in the show notes, all the details with the website and link. So thank you so much for your time today. Your insights are very significant and impactful. And I know our audience is very grateful to you for sharing so openly and generously.
Thanks so much, Dorothy.
Thank you. Take care. There you have it, my friends. Lots of actionable tips on how to do job search the right way, how to put a value on your services, as well as how to explain any gaps in your employment. Job searching is not an easy process, but with the right tools and the right attitude, you can land your dream career. Thank you for listening, and bye for now. If you're ready to rise up and get paid for your worth, be sure to get the free salary negotiation training at DorothyMashburn.com/fight for your worth. This is the ultimate step-by-step guide in order to help you secure a promotion or break the glass ceiling. Again, it's at DorothyMashburn.com/fight for your worth. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.